I found my wife's affair with our lawyer who helped us fight over $300, $0 in inheritance. Then she suddenly disappeared with half the estate. Now I'm being sued for betrayal I never committed. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, living a nightmare I never saw coming. It all started with a simple suspicion, that nagging feeling that something wasn't right. At first I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then I noticed little things, her phone always hidden, strange late nights, and a sudden change in her attitude. My wife Emily had always been a bit of a diva, bitchy, manipulative, and quick to lie when it suited her. But I never imagined she'd cheat on me, especially not with our lawyer. Yeah, you read that right, our lawyer, Mark. The guy we hired to help us settle an inheritance dispute that had dragged on for months. We were fighting over a $300, $0 estate left by my late uncle, and Mark was supposed to be the best. But somewhere along the line, I started noticing how cozy Emily and Mark had become. I'd catch them exchanging secretive texts, her giggling at something on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, and the way Mark would look at her, like he was already planning how to get her into bed. One day, I decided to dig a little deeper. I got access to her phone, something I never thought I'd do, but I was desperate for answers. That's when I found the messages. It was disgusting. Flirty texts, pictures, even explicit conversations about how much she wanted to see him, how she loved the thrill of sneaking around. They were planning to meet up, and she told him she couldn't wait to get away with him. My stomach dropped. I felt sick. I confronted her that night. I was furious, trembling with anger and betrayal. I showed her the messages, expecting her to deny everything or at least try to lie her way out. Instead, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It's not what you think. Mark and I are just friends. You're overreacting. Stop being so paranoid." That's when I knew she was lying. She always did. But her tone was so dismissive, so bitchy, like she was annoyed I was bothering her with something so trivial. I couldn't believe it. How could she lie so easily? How could she sit there and deny what was staring me right in the face? I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. This wasn't just about her cheating. It was about the fact that she'd been lying to me for months, hiding her secret life behind a mask of innocence. And what made it worse? The money. The inheritance was supposed to be a fresh start, a way to secure our future. Instead, she was throwing it away, probably to fund her little affair with Mark. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I thought about all the times I'd defended her, trusted her, loved her. And now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd rather lie and cheat than face the truth. I felt betrayed, not just as a husband but as a man who thought he knew his wife. I kept asking myself, how long has this been going on? How deep does her deception go? The worst part, I knew she'd lie her way out of this, spin some bullshit about how it was all a misunderstanding. But I had the evidence and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The next day, I decided I'd had enough. I needed to think clearly, plan my next move. I was hurt, yes, but I also knew I had to be smart. Emily always thought she could manipulate her way out of anything, but I wasn't going to let her do that this time. I'd been betrayed by my wife and, strangely enough, by the person I trusted most, Mark. I knew I'd have to confront them both, but I also knew I'd need a plan. This wasn't just about catching her cheating. It was about reclaiming my dignity and figuring out what my next steps would be. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to fight for my marriage, for my money, or for my self-respect. But here I am, facing a mess that's only going to get worse before it gets better. And I'm telling this story because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. But I also believe that revenge, when done right, can help you find closure. I don't want to be a victim. I want to be the one who finally takes control. That's what I'll do. After I found out about Emily and Mark, everything changed. I felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The betrayal hit me hard, but what hit even harder was realizing how much I'd been blind to her manipulations all along. I mean, she's always been a bitch, sharp-tongued, dismissive, and good at hiding her true colors, but I never thought she'd go this far. I thought she loved me, or at least that I was enough for her. Turns out I was just a pawn in her game, a way to get her hands on that inheritance and whatever else she could drain from our life together. The big problem was the inheritance. That $300, $0 wasn't just some money, it was supposed to be our future. We had plans. Buy a house, start a business maybe. Even travel, but Emily had other ideas. The moment the inheritance appeared, she started acting different. She was cold, distant, and always had some excuse for not talking about the money. Then she started spending it. Big purchases, designer clothes, expensive dinners. I didn't pay much attention at first, thinking she just wanted to enjoy the money after all the stress of the legal fight. But looking back, it was obvious she was planning something. The final straw was when I caught her sneaking out one night, her phone in her hand and that bitchy smirk on her face. I followed her, more out of suspicion than anything else. She went to some fancy hotel downtown, met up with Mark, and I saw them kiss goodbye. That was the moment I knew for sure. She was cheating on me and she'd been lying about everything. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she pretend to be the perfect wife while secretly screwing around with our lawyer? I decided I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I needed to plan my revenge, but I also needed to be smart. First, I gathered evidence, screenshots, bank statements, anything that could prove her infidelity and her financial manipulations. I knew Emily was good at lying, but I also knew she was reckless. She'd slip up eventually. I kept quiet, pretending everything was normal, but inside I was boiling with anger and hurt. I didn't want to confront her without proof, and I definitely didn't want her to spin some sob story to turn everything around on me. In the meantime, I started digging into the estate. I wanted to know exactly what she'd taken, how she'd hidden it, and if Mark was involved financially. I hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do, and got access to her bank accounts. It turned out she transferred a significant portion of the inheritance into her secret accounts. I was stunned. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. It made me furious to realize she'd been secretly plotting her escape while pretending everything was fine. The more I learned, the clearer it became that Emily was a master manipulator. She lied about her whereabouts, about her spending, and even about her feelings. She'd always been good at spinning tailies, but her lies now were so blatant I couldn't ignore them. The worst part, she kept insisting she was innocent, that I was overreacting, that I was jealous or insecure. But I had the evidence and I knew better. She was playing me, just like she played everyone else in her life. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with everything laid out on the table. I wanted her to see that I wasn't naive anymore. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to be her pawn or her fool. I was hurt, yes, but I was also angry, and I was determined to take control of this mess. I also realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not as a wife, not as a partner. She'd betrayed me too deeply. It was time to decide whether I'd fight to save what was left of our marriage or cut my losses and walk away. So I planned my next move. I knew I needed to confront her with concrete evidence, but I also wanted to catch her in the act if possible. I didn't want her to lie her way out of this again. I was done being the fool. I started thinking about legal options, about how to protect what was mine, and how to expose her for what she really was. A manipulative, selfish woman who'd put her own desires above everything else, including her vows. The betrayal had cut so deep that I was starting to see her for what she truly was, a liar and a thief, not just of money but of trust and love. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to fight my own wife, but here I am. I'm preparing for a war I didn't want, all because she couldn't keep her legs closed and her mouth shut. I want justice, not just for the money, but for the years I wasted believing in her, loving her, trusting her. I know it's going to get messier before it gets better, but I'm ready. I have to be. Because at the end of the day, I refuse to be the fool in this game any longer. The days that followed were a blur of planning, anger, and a deepening sense of betrayal. I started pulling together everything I had, screenshots of the texts, bank statements showing her transfers, hotel receipts from her secret meetings. Every piece of evidence painted a clear picture. Emily had been lying to me for months, possibly longer, and she had been using me and the inheritance as her personal playground. It was infuriating to realize how easily she manipulated everyone around her, especially me. I also hired a private investigator, someone I found through a recommendation. It was ugly, but I needed to know the full extent of her deception. Turns out she'd opened multiple accounts under different names, accounts I didn't even know existed, and was funneling money into them. The transfers weren't small either. She'd taken nearly half of the inheritance, possibly more. She was planning to disappear with it all, and I was just a convenient fool she was using to cover her tracks. The thought made my stomach churn. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I decided I'd confront her directly, but I wanted to do it with all the evidence in hand. I set up a meeting at her favorite coffee shop, someplace she liked to pretend she was innocent. I told her I had something to say, and I laid everything out, showing her the messages, the bank transfers, the receipts. Her reaction was priceless. She looked surprised at first, then annoyed, and finally she started to get defensive. "You're crazy," she snapped, crossing her arms. "You're just jealous, or maybe you're paranoid. Mark and I are just friends. You're reading too much into this." Her voice was sharp, dismissive, like she thought she could talk her way out of this. But I wasn't buying it. I pressed her harder, showing her the proof, demanding answers. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was just insecure, that I was making everything up. But I knew better. I saw her for what she was, a liar, a manipulator, a thief. The thing that hurt the most was her tone, so bitchy, so dismissive. She'd always had this way of making me feel small, but now she was just outright contemptuous. Like I was nothing. That moment made me realize how much I'd been taken for granted, how much I'd let her walk all over me because I loved her. And now I was furious. Furious at her, furious at myself for not seeing it sooner. After that confrontation, I decided I couldn't stay silent. I contacted a lawyer, someone who specialized in estate law and marital disputes. I wanted to find out my rights, how I could protect what was left, and how to deal with her sneaky moves. The lawyer told me I had a strong case, especially with the evidence I'd gathered. But there was a problem. Emily had already started to cover her tracks. She transferred money, closed accounts, and even hired her own lawyer, probably to prepare for a fight. That's when I realized how deep her deception went. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively trying to steal from me and run away with her lover. I felt sick thinking about how she'd planned all this behind my back, manipulating the legal system and everyone around her. It was like she'd turned into a different person, a cold, calculating con artist. I'd been so blind, so trusting, and now I was paying the price. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with this. I started drafting a detailed timeline of everything I knew, every lie, every transfer, every secret meeting. I wanted to be prepared for the legal battle ahead, but more than that, I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to be a pushover anymore. I'd been hurt enough. Now it was time to fight back, legally, emotionally, whatever it took. Meanwhile, Emily's attitude kept getting bitchier. She'd send me nasty texts, accusing me of being paranoid, calling me names, trying to make me doubt myself. But it only fueled my resolve. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I started to realize that I'd been carrying her lies all this time, and I was done. I was done being the fool, the doormat, the guy who believed in fairy tales. Every day I felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger because she'd betrayed me so deeply, and relief because I finally saw her for what she was. I'd been living in a fog, but now the truth was clear. I was hurt, yes, but I was also stronger than I thought. I knew this wasn't over yet. There was a long fight ahead, but I was ready. I had the evidence, I had the legal support, and I had the clarity to finally take control. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Was it my fault for trusting her so much? Or was this just who she was all along, a bitchy liar who lied and cheated her way through life? The answers didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I was going to do next. I had to protect what was mine, stand up for myself, and make sure she couldn't get away with this. Because at the end of the day, if I didn't fight for myself now, no one else would. The legal battle was about to start, and honestly, I felt like I was walking into a war I wasn't fully prepared for. Emily, of course, went full bitch mode, sending me nasty texts, accusing me of everything from being insecure to outright cheating myself, which was laughable given what I'd uncovered. She hired her own lawyer, a slick guy named Todd, who tried to spin her lies and deny everything. Honestly, it was almost comical how she thought she could just wave her hand and dismiss the mountain of evidence I had. But I knew better. I could see through her act, her bitchy attitude, her sneering tone, her attempts to gaslight me into doubting my own sanity. Meanwhile, I kept gathering more proof. I hired a private investigator to dig into her finances further. Turns out, she'd opened more accounts under fake names, stashed money in offshore accounts, and even gotten a restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing her after I confronted her with the evidence. That was a lie, of course. I hadn't done anything wrong except try to get the truth out of her. But her lawyer was good. He managed to spin it as if I was the villain, the one causing all the trouble. The most shocking part was discovering that Emily had been secretly seeing Mark for months. I found hotel receipts, secret emails, and even a few voice messages, things I'd never expected to find in my life. The worst part, she was trying to convince everyone that I was the one cheating, that I was paranoid, that I was jealous. It was classic Emily, blame everyone else for her own mistakes, but I wasn't buying her lies anymore. I had the proof and I was ready to fight back. The court date was set and I was nervous but determined. I wanted the truth to come out, wanted everyone to see her for what she really was. I prepared a detailed dossier, organized all my evidence, and made sure I had witnesses lined up to testify. I also hired a financial expert to explain how Emily had siphoned off the inheritance, how she'd been lying about her expenses, and how she'd used her charm and bitchiness to manipulate everyone around her. I was ready to take her down, not just for myself, but for the betrayal of my trust and everything she'd stolen. On the day of the hearing, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. I knew I was about to expose her lies in front of a judge, and I hoped that would be enough to stop her from running off with the rest of the money. When Emily showed up, she looked like she'd been through hell. Her makeup was smudged, her bitchy attitude was still there, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew I had her dead to rights. Mark was there too, smug as ever, probably thinking he'd get away with it. But I had the upper hand. The court proceedings were intense. Emily tried her usual tactics, lying, sneering, dismissing everything. But I had the evidence and I made sure it all came out. I presented the bank statements, the texts, the hotel receipts, everything. I called witnesses, including the private investigator and my lawyer, to reinforce my case. Emily's lawyer tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, but the judge saw through her bullshit. It was clear she'd been cheating, stealing, and lying from the start. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. He ordered Emily to return the stolen inheritance, pay damages for the financial harm she caused, and cease all contact with Mark. That moment felt like a huge victory, like I finally took back some control. But I knew the fight wasn't over. Emily was furious and she refused to accept the verdict. She kept crying, screaming, acting like the victim. That's typical Emily, so bitchy, so entitled, but I didn't care. I finally saw her for what she was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd do anything for money and sex. After the court, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. I'd fought tooth and nail and I'd won, at least for now. But the emotional toll was heavy. I was devastated but also angry. I had trusted her, loved her, and she'd thrown it all away for a fling and a quick buck. I realized I'd been living in denial, hopping. She'd change, but she never would. Her true colors had come out and I had to accept that I was better off without her. That night I sat alone, reflecting on everything. I thought about the betrayal, the lies, the money she stole, and how I'd been so blind. I also thought about what I'd learned, about trusting too easily, about the dangers of manipulative people, and about the importance of standing up for myself. I knew that moving forward, I'd never let anyone take advantage of me like that again. I'd rebuild my life, piece by piece, and learn to trust again, carefully this time. Most of all, I realized that revenge wasn't just about getting my money back or exposing her lies. It was about reclaiming my dignity and making sure she couldn't hurt me anymore. I might have lost my wife, but I gained clarity. And that, in the end, was worth more than any inheritance or petty revenge. The aftermath of the court's decision hit me harder than I expected. I thought that once the judge ruled in my favor, I'd feel some sense of closure, but instead, I was left with a complex jumble of relief, anger, and profound disappointment. Emily, of course, refused to accept her defeat gracefully. She responded with a barrage of bitchy insults, accusing me of being a jealous, insecure fool who couldn't handle a little fun. She spread rumors about how I was controlling, paranoid, and even suggested I was the one cheating, just to muddy the waters. That was classic Emily. Blame everyone else while she gets away with her lies. Her reaction only fueled my resolve. I knew I had to cut ties completely. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I filed for separation and began the process of dividing what little was left of our assets. She fought me at every turn, trying to drag things out, but I had the evidence, and I wasn't going to back down. I also made sure to document everything: her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations. I wanted a clear record of how she'd lied and cheated her way to her own destruction. Meanwhile, Mark's role in all this was becoming even more obvious. I found out he'd been involved in the financial scheme, helping her hide assets and create false documents. I hired a forensic accountant, and what they uncovered was staggering. Mark had been funneling money into offshore accounts, and Emily had been using his legal services to cover her tracks. I confronted Mark directly, and he refused to admit anything at first, but I had enough evidence to make him sweat. In the end, he was served with a subpoena to testify, and I made it clear that I wasn't going to let him get away with aiding her crimes. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. Every time I thought I was close to moving on, Emily would throw a new insult or lie my way. She kept her bitchy, manipulative attitude intact, even in her lowest moments. But I refused to let her see me break. I stayed strong, focused on rebuilding my life. I started therapy, not because I was weak, far from it, but because I needed to process everything she'd put me through. I also leaned on friends and family, who couldn't believe how cold and calculating Emily had become. The worst part was realizing how much I'd trusted her, how I'd believed her lies and let her manipulate my emotions. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind. But then I remembered, love makes you stupid sometimes. I was in love, and love can blind you to the truth. Now I knew better. I learned that trusting blindly is dangerous, especially with someone who's bitchy and manipulative from the start. Despite all the chaos, I started to see a silver lining. I was finally free. Free from her lies, her manipulations, her selfishness. I could breathe again. I could rebuild my life without her draining me emotionally and financially. It's strange. I used to think money was everything, but now I realize the real victory was reclaiming my peace of mind. I still have scars, sure, but I'm healing. I've learned that revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about restoring your dignity and making sure the people who betrayed you can't do it again. I've also become more cautious. I don't trust easily anymore, and I pay attention to the little signs, whether it's someone's attitude, their lies, or how they manipulate situations. I've learned that bitchy, manipulative people often hide behind a charming facade, but their true nature eventually shows. I want anyone reading this to know, don't ignore the red flags. Trust your instincts, and if you find yourself in a situation like mine, gather evidence. Fight back. Because in the end, you're the only one who can protect yourself from people like Emily. Now I'm focused on moving forward. I've started a new career, made new friends, and even begun dating again, carefully this time. The pain of betrayal still lingers, but I refuse to let it define me. I've learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. And I've realized that revenge isn't about hurting someone else. It's about reclaiming your life and making sure that the people who hurt you know they can't get away with it. That's the real victory. And I plan to keep fighting for myself, for my sanity, and for the future I deserve. Looking back now, I realize that the whole ordeal changed me more than I ever expected. I used to think love was enough, trust, loyalty, a little bit of hope, that those would carry a marriage through anything. Turns out I was naive. Emily showed me just how deep the betrayal could go when someone is manipulative, selfish, and bitchy enough to lie, cheat, and steal her way to what she wants. That realization was brutal, but it also set me free. I learned that revenge isn't just about getting back at someone or exposing their lies. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your peace of mind. I took everything she threw at me, her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal, and I turned it into a lesson. A lesson that trust needs to be earned, that people can surprise you in the worst ways, and that sometimes you have to fight for yourself, even if it means losing everything you thought was real. The most important thing I've come to understand is that no amount of money, no inheritance or material gain is worth sacrificing your happiness or your self-respect. Emily's greed and her bitchy attitude cost her everything: her marriage, her reputation, her standing. But I'm the one who's left standing, stronger and more cautious than ever. I've come to see that the real victory is in surviving, in rebuilding what was broken, and in knowing that I didn't let her win. I want to tell anyone reading this: don't ignore the red flags. When someone is manipulative and bitchy, trust your instincts. Gather evidence, stand your ground, and don't let them manipulate you into submission. Because at the end of the day, your life is your own, and you deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. If someone betrays you, don't be afraid to fight back, whether it's legally, emotionally, or just by walking away. You owe it to yourself. Most of all, I've learned that revenge, when done right, is about reclaiming your power. It's about showing that you're not going to be a victim anymore, that you're stronger than their lies, their manipulations, and their bitchy attitude. I may have lost my wife, but I gained clarity. I found my strength again, and I know now that I will never let anyone manipulate or betray me like that again. This story is my truth. It's messy, it's raw, and it's real. And if it helps someone else see the warning signs or find the courage to stand up for themselves, then it's worth sharing. Because in the end, the only person who can truly protect you is yourself. Trust that, learn from it, and never forget that your dignity is worth more than any inheritance or fleeting moment of pleasure. Stand tall, stay strong, and keep fighting for the life you deserve.